to address us now, and first will be Paul Evans, representing the Democrat, Independent, and Working Families parties. Paul.
I was sitting there, thinking about what I was going to talk about, and Marvin's comments stirred memories. I don't know where you were 15 years ago. Some of you might have been here, some of you were other places, but 15 years ago I was actually at Camp Rylea. People had just flown planes into buildings, and my Air National Guard unit was recalled to active duty for what eventually became 4 years. I say that because sometimes during campaign season, lots of things are said, lots of things are promised. And what you really need to know, I think, are two things. One, you need to know about the candidate. You need to know their background, their values, their approach. And then the second thing is you need to know what they want to do if given the opportunity to serve you. The military, for me, was a very long, strange experience. I spent 20 years in the military. Thought I was done in '97. Then I joined the Air Guard. Thought I was done again. And then we were called to war. Thought I was done again. Was called back. After 20 years, I spent a total of 4.5 years in combat zones. Now, for many of you in this audience, you spend a lot of time in the military and in war zones across the world. But one of the most important things for me when approaching this job is duty. For 20 years, I did everything I could to try to keep this country safe. I spent time in places that we still can't talk about. I saw the way people were treated and was grateful for coming from a place where we didn't treat people that way. I ran in 2014 for the Oregon legislature because I believe Oregon, I believe America, I believe this district is worth it. I didn't want to stand by and watch the promise of Oregon that I had been raised to appreciate. I didn't want to see it disappear on my watch. And over the last 2 years, I've done my very best in trying to work on legislation, improve it where I can, pass legislation when we can, introduce legislation sometimes for simply raising the question, because I believe Oregon is worth the fight. Now, you can find flaws with any candidate, you can disagree with any particular party. One of the fun aspects of my experience in the legislature is I make the Democratic Party as mad as the Republican Party on a usual basis. In fact, if you look it up, I actually have the worst record as a Democrat voting with the Democrats, something that the speaker reminded me of just not long ago. I say that because of this. I've spent my entire life in public service. I was a city councilor, I was a mayor, I was a school board member, voluntary positions all. I spent time as a senior policy advisor to Governor Kulongoski, and in and out of government, spent time in private sector trying to sell Oregon goods overseas in places like Vietnam and Taiwan. I think serving in the Oregon legislature requires leadership and experience. I think it requires vision, but more important than all of that, I think it requires an ability, a demonstrated ability, to work across partisan lines and to work on fixing the problems rather than the blame. In 2016, I was able to co-chief sponsor and get passed 3 bills out of the Oregon legislature. One was on housing security, 4081. One was on small business development, Senate Bill 1565, that will actually bring jobs and opportunity to the rural areas around here. But the most important thing I was able to play a role in is getting House Joint Resolution 202 to the ballot. That became ballot measure 96. It'll be a referral this November. For the first time in at least 60 years, the state of Oregon will actually have an opportunity to invest in veterans outreach and services. Why is that important? Well, I have been treated reasonably well by the VA. I'm not trying to do this for me. But there are 340,000 veterans living in Oregon, of which only 100,000 currently receive earned benefits, care, and services. If we were able, through a little bit of economic development, a little bit of outreach, a little bit of lottery revenues, 1.5% to be specific, if we were able to target those resources and reach the other 200,000 that are currently not receiving services, we would be able to bring federal revenues in, we would be able to keep faith with the generations that fought wars for us, and we would actually be able to save money because we would be able to transition people from state programming over to federal. That's an example, in my view, of how I can continue to serve this district. And I'm asking for 2 more years to be your voice in the Capitol, 2 more years to try to do the best I can to bring people together and solve problems. Thank you.
And finally, tonight, representing the Republican Party, Laura Moret.
Thank you very much for coming tonight and being so patient and listening to all of our hearts and our important issues on why we're running, which is really the main question I always get asked is, why the heck are you running for office? And that's an interesting question, but for 28 years, my husband and I have ran a small business. And we determined that year after year, it was getting harder and harder for us to keep our doors open. Every year, there were new regulations and new struggles for us, for our small business. You see, I am a daughter of a Navy vet. My father was stationed over in Hawaii, where he met my mother. He brought her here to the mainland, and he built a modest home out in Shaw, where my daughter actually just bought it from him a couple weeks ago, so it's still in the family. And I was taught a hard work ethic. I was taught that if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you say you're going to be somewhere, you're there, and your handshake is your contract. I was taught the value of honesty and integrity. And I was taught that any time that there was an issue on our farm, whether it be us or our neighbors, somebody's cows was out, their field need baling, my dad would look at us and he'd say, girls, put your boots on, grab your gloves, and let's go fix it. And that's what we did. We didn't sit around and complain. We didn't blame. We didn't do anything. We didn't have time to do that. We put our boots on, grabbed our gloves, and we fixed it. So with that being said, after 28 years of running a business, and my husband and I are looking at what's happening with the rising cost of our energy bills, our healthcare bills, our schools, our electricity, with all these rising costs of housing, my husband looked at me and he said, honey, put on your boots, grab your gloves, and go fix that. And I looked at him and I said, okay, I'll be right back. And that's what I'm planning on doing. I want to get down there and I want to fix that. Because we've had a single party in the government right now, and it's not been, I know it hasn't been working for me. I don't know if it's been working for you or not, but I plan to fix that. I mentioned my husband. I have 3 adult children that went through our Salem-Keizer School District. I also have 2 grandchildren, Landon, who is in kindergarten, and Layla, who is in 4th grade. And I'm watching our schools are 47th in the nation. Well, how many are grandparents here? Okay, then you can hear my passionate fight for this. I do not want my grandkids to be 47th at anything, ever. And I don't want your grandkids and your kids to be 47th at anything, ever. And I will not let that happen on my watch. And so we are in those classrooms. I have been in the classrooms for 22, 23 years, side by side with those teachers, from grade school, middle school, high school, to my youngest son in college. And I'm watching my grandson, Landon, who has 29 6-year-olds in his classroom to his teacher. Could you imagine? I had trouble with my 3. Could you imagine 29 of those kids that you have to deal with? Our classrooms are overcrowded. Our kids aren't in school anymore. They're never in school. Did you know by the time that our students graduate from high school here in Oregon, they will have 1 year less school time than kids in Washington State? That's a lot of times that they can be in the classroom and that they can be learning. Education is important to us because our kids are our future, right? Our kids are our retirement. Our kids are where we need to make those investments. And so that's huge for me. The other thing that's really important to me as a candidate that's running is transparency. That if you ask me a question on where I stand on issues, I promise you I will tell you an answer on where I stand on those issues, because I owe that to you as the voters. You need to know where I stand on issues. I will not dance around issues. I will not plead the fifth. I will tell you where I stand. Whether you agree with me or not, at least you'll know where I stand on issues because I owe that to you. We are now in a state to where we feel the people that we work for the government, right? That we're under the thumb of the government. When did that happen? When did it flip on its head? Okay, the government should work for you. I should work for you. I represent you. Remember, it's a government by the people, right? Of the people, or was it of the people, by the people? For the people, for you. And again, I have been in the business world for 28 years. We've taken somebody's dreams, we've put it on paper, we've made the plan, and we made it a reality. And we did that within a budget. I know how to work within budgets. We've been doing that for 28 years. And this state needs somebody that will work within its budget and not keep coming back to you and say, hey, guess what? We need more money. So I appreciate the time tonight for letting me come up here and share with you my passion and my heart and why I'm running. So I look forward to answering any questions you may have for me later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. We have one question for these last two candidates, and then it looks like we may have time for one last question presented by one of our residents just a little while ago. That'll just require a yes or no, maybe. Okay, Laura, you're first up for the last question, and then that leaves Paul for next up. And the question is this: what is your plan to help school districts improve graduation rates?
Yeah, again, thank you. Perfect question for me, right? Because education is very important to me. I have a couple of ideas. One, I mentioned before, we need to decrease our class sizes, right? We need to increase how many days our kids in schools. We need to make sure, this is so important, that we have the best teachers in front of our kids. They're there because they're the best, not because they've been there the longest. That is so important. We also need to increase our career and technical programs that we have at our school, our vocational programs. When I was in school, we had woodshop, welding, mechanics. We had all those programs for those non-traditional college-bound kids. We don't have that anymore. And you know what's happening? Those manufacturing jobs are being taken out of our state. That's income that needs to be back here in our state working for us. So there are so many things that we can do for our kids. But again, we have leadership that is in there that is they are not being leaders. They're not willing to make these hard decisions. We need to get rid of this standardized testing. We need to quit testing. They're testing our kids to death, right? All our teachers are doing, Mrs. Bowers in my daughter's third grade class, granddaughters, oh my gosh, third grade class. All she does all day is teach Layla how to test. Because if they don't test at a certain standard, they're not getting that money. They're not testing them the way that they used to. So we need to take that out of there and give more local control to our teachers, our principals, and our schools. So I have some really good ideas, and I'm ready to implement those if and when I get the privilege to be in office. Thank you.
When it comes to improving education, that's something I have been working on since at least 2008, when I was appointed to the Central School Board, served about 3 years on that, and as a hobby lobbyist and later as a legislator, been working on. There's 4 components to actually improving our education system. Sometimes wishing you could fix things quickly by waving a wand is nice, but it unfortunately is more complicated than that. There will be more money required at some point, but money is not the only answer. The other answer has been alluded to, and I concur, rethinking what we are teaching our students and how we measure what we are teaching our students. Standardized tests are not a great strategy, especially given the wide diversity of students that are entering our doors every day. The third component is we have to rethink some of the federal and state requirements on how we teach people. Some students are far more expensive than other students, which has created a problem. And the fourth thing I think we need to do is we need to recognize that education is not, it's not the end of the story. That education, K-12, public schools, should be the beginning of a lifelong learning adventure, which means we have to rethink the idea of being done with graduation. We have to rethink how we invest in what we are trying to build in terms of workforce development. Now, in the legislature, I've worked very hard to pass legislation that gave us extra time to rethink the Smarter Balanced. I've pushed for more funds, and we were fortunate in getting another $1 million for the CTEC program here in Salem. I've worked with the education community to try to make sure that the seam between K-12, community college, and universities is cleaner and simpler, that courses and credits that count at one place should count at another. My career, my day job is as a professor at community college at Chemeketa. So I see the kids, the products of our K-12 system every day. The one thing we cannot do is believe that it can be done in one fell swoop. We didn't get in this mess overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take cooperation and bipartisanship, and I hope to play that role.
Last question for all of you. Bud, is there anybody to your left? Okay, it looks like a big gap there. Okay. Well, you can if you want to. The question that's posed by one of our residents at dinner time is, do you support or oppose ballot measure 97? Now, before you answer that, I want to let all of us know that 2 weeks from now, we will be having 2 representatives from the League of Women Voters here to talk about all of the ballot measures. Okay, so you'll get the full scoop there. But a quick oppose, support from each of you.
Nay.
Nay.
Oppose.
Yes, we're a state of small business people. I support the tax.
I oppose the tax.
It's a citizen's choice.
Citizen's choice, he said. Laura?
Was that a yes or a no?
That's citizen's choice. In our system, the legislative activity is either done by the legislature or citizens put something on the ballot.
We can't hear.
The complexities of it's not a yes/no question to me, and here's why. I spent a lot of time overseas making sure people have the right to vote. I actually value the right to vote. There are some things legislators should be doing. Once citizens put something on the ballot, it is up to the citizens to decide.
How are you voting?
I'm personally voting yes. That's not a problem. I've answered that before. But the issue is it a legislator's job to advance a priority that was put on the ballot by citizens, a program that we will have to make work if it's passed? There is a role, and again, government isn't unidimensional. It is complex.
Thank you, Paul. Laura?
No.
Thank you all.
Excuse me, folks, just 1 minute, please. You are all invited to meet the candidates and talk with them and their representatives. We have booths around, and I hope you will take advantage of it. We want to thank these folks for coming tonight. And you heard 2 weeks from tonight a discussion of the ballot measures right here in this very room at 6:30. And then 1 week from tonight, we will hear candidates for the position of Oregon Secretary of State, Treasurer, and Attorney General. Same format. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you.